I was recently name-checked in Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' recent filing against Justin Baldoni in Wayfarer Studios.
As the articles have come out, it turns out more and more that, yeah, WME was pretty much forced by Ryan and Blake to drop Justice.
You ever see Hollywood elites try to play victim and then fail so miserably that they become the punchline of their own scandal? Well, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds just pulled Candace Owens into their lawsuit, hoping to silence her.
Yesterday, I got a phone call and it just sent me on a warpath. It was so crazy. It wasn't even that serious in the retrospect, but I was just like...
But instead of backing down, she turned their entire PR stunt into an absolute disaster. And trust me, this is not just some petty drama. This is the ultimate exposure of Hollywood hypocrisy, control, and desperate cover-ups. Because Blake Lively thought she could manipulate the media, spin the truth, and walk away unscathed. But instead, she and Ryan just got dragged through the mud in ways they never saw coming. Candace Owens is laughing all the way through this, and by the end of this video, you'll see why.
I want you to hear.
I wonder if you could tell us about a little bit of a mess that I gather you've been involved in.
February 26th. Candace Owens wakes up, probably sipping her morning coffee and scrolling through the usual Hollywood nonsense, when suddenly, bam! Her name is sitting right there in Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' lawsuit. And here's the kicker. She had absolutely nothing to do with this case. Not a single direct connection. Not a single legal involvement. Not even a passing mention before this lawsuit hit the courtroom. Yet somehow, Blake's legal team thought name-dropping Candace would be their golden ticket to controlling the narrative.
Like I said, I am not involved in this lawsuit, or at least that's what my lawyer kept telling me. Oh no, you're not a part of this lawsuit.
But why would they do that? It's simple. Candace was saying things they didn't want people to hear. She was publicly calling out the contradictions in Blake's victim narrative. She was highlighting the shady moves being made in court. She was pointing out the hypocrisy of leaking private texts to the media while simultaneously demanding courtroom privacy.
And I know where you're going with this one. Do you have notes on it? Oh yeah. Those are the two things I said to myself.
And for Blake and Ryan, that was a problem. See, Hollywood operates by a certain set of rules. They control the story. They control the media. They control what people think. But Candace Owens? She's not part of their club. She doesn't play by their rules. And unlike the typical celebrity journalists who tiptoe around the industry's big names, she goes straight for the jugular. So instead of ignoring her or addressing her arguments with facts, Blake's legal team took the coward's way out.
Brian Friedman and Wayfarer wanted essentially a model protection order, which is indeed standard. It's just a standard protection order.
They tried to discredit her. They tried to lump her in with their enemies. They tried to silence her by making her part of the lawsuit itself. It was a desperate move, a panicked attempt to paint her as some kind of conspirator. Candace's reaction? Absolute gold. Now, let's be real. Most people would freak out. If your name showed up in a multi-million-dollar Hollywood lawsuit, you'd probably call a lawyer, issue a PR statement, and start sweating bullets. But Candace? She did the exact opposite. She didn't panic. She didn't play the victim. She didn't even take the lawsuit seriously. She mocked Blake and Ryan for being so thin-skinned that they had to drag a political commentator into their personal meltdown.
Sweetheart, this entire lawsuit is a waste of court resources. Let's stop pretending that like this part right here is where it gets bad.
She roasted their legal strategy, calling it one of the biggest jokes in Hollywood history. And she jokingly celebrated the fact that she had officially made it into the Hollywood elite's biggest scandal. She went on her show, broke down the court filings, and basically said, "Oh, you're mad? Good. That means I struck a nerve." And this is where it all starts falling apart for Blake and Ryan. They thought dragging Candace Owens into this mess would shut her up. They thought it would make her look bad. They thought it would make their case stronger. Instead, it backfired in the most humiliating way possible.
Because these things happened on set, online, after she complained on set.
Because now, Candace Owens has a front row seat to their downfall. She's not backing down. She's not staying silent. Instead, she's turning their lawsuit into her personal comedy special. And the best part? The internet is loving it. Blake and Ryan's carefully crafted Hollywood image is starting to crack. And Candace? She's just getting warmed up.
But on the 20th, which was I think last Friday, Blake's team filed for a slightly modified type of protection order that would include increased protections to third parties. Now,
Most people would panic if they suddenly found themselves named in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. They'd go into damage control mode, issue a carefully crafted PR statement, and lawyer up. But Candace Owens, she saw it and laughed. The moment she realized Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds had dragged her into their legal battle, she didn't flinch. Instead, she went online and mocked the entire situation. She joked that she could retire now because she had officially arrived. When a Hollywood actress and her overhyped husband feel the need to mention you in a legal filing, you must be doing something right. But this
I am going to be put not just in the Deadpool movies, but all over that next Taylor Swift album.
But this wasn't just Candace Owens taking a victory lap over ruffling celebrity feathers. This was Hollywood elites trying to use the legal system to silence criticism. Blake and Ryan weren't just annoyed by her commentary, they saw it as a threat. They had spent so much time crafting the perfect narrative, presenting Blake as the helpless victim in a legal battle they wanted the world to sympathize with. Then along came Candace, exposing contradictions, calling out inconsistencies, and saying the one thing they couldn't stand, the truth. And that's when it became clear. This wasn't about Candace being wrong, it was about Candace being right. Blake and Ryan had options. They could have ignored her, they could have addressed her criticisms with facts, but instead they did what powerful people always do when they feel cornered.
He just started getting angry, okay? And I mean, like, can't answer a basic question about your ideas without snapping on people.
They tried to bury the person exposing them. They name-dropped her in their lawsuit, hoping it would discredit her, scare her, or at the very least make her think twice about speaking out. Except, that plan completely backfired. Instead of shutting up, Candace doubled down. Instead of distancing herself, she got louder. And instead of looking like the innocent victims they wanted to portray themselves as, Blake and Ryan ended up looking exactly like what Owens accused them of being. Hollywood elites desperate to control the conversation. The moment they put her name in that lawsuit, they lost.
Because anything we do is gonna, it's clearly Justin's fault. Nothing Blake did is her own responsibility. Is that
Candace Owens was never going to let them dictate the narrative. And now, the entire internet was watching as she ripped apart their strategy piece by piece. If Blake Lively thought this lawsuit would make her look like the helpless victim, a woman bravely standing up for justice, she couldn't have been more wrong. Because rather than rallying behind her, people started asking questions. At first, it seemed like the typical Hollywood playbook. Leak a few well-placed headlines, let the media do the heavy lifting, and wait for the flood of sympathy to roll in. But this time, it didn't work. Instead of blindly accepting Blake's story, people started noticing the cracks in her narrative. And
when it was actually Blake Lively in that initial filing that said everything but the name.
And once those cracks started showing, the whole thing collapsed. Instead of painting Justin Baldoni as the villain, this lawsuit did something Blake never anticipated. It turned the spotlight onto her. Fans who had once adored her were suddenly skeptical. Why was she going to such extreme lengths to control the public perception of this case? Why was she filing legal motions that didn't just protect her but actively restricted Baldoni from seeing key evidence against him? If she had nothing to hide, why was she so desperate to keep things buried? This wasn't about justice anymore. It was about control. Hollywood has long mastered the art of spinning a narrative. But what Blake didn't expect was that in 2024, the internet isn't as easy to fool as it used to be.
And the internet does its own thing. There's no way any one person could have been behind and controlled and pulled all of the strings of everything that Miss Blake Lively is facing.
It didn't take long before social media was flooded with doubts, with people questioning what Blake was really after. Was she genuinely fighting for justice, or was she simply trying to silence inconvenient truths? And just like that, her perfect PR strategy started unraveling. As public scrutiny grew, Blake did what any Hollywood A-lister does when things start slipping out of their control. She ran to the legal system for protection. Enter the protective order. Blake's legal team argued that certain sensitive details needed to remain private. That's not unusual in high-profile cases. But the way she went about it, that's where things got shady. This wasn't just a standard request to keep private matters out of the tabloids. This was a legal maneuver designed to bury evidence that even Baldoni himself wouldn't be allowed to see.
I'm just calling it the Taylor Swift clause, essentially allowing the respective lawyers to just deem anything that they want, attorney's eyes only.
Read that again. The man being accused of wrongdoing, the man at the center of this entire legal battle, wouldn't even be allowed to see all the evidence being used against him. That's not about justice. That's about power. Blake's team claimed this move was necessary to protect third parties, arguing that other individuals not involved in the case could be unfairly harmed if certain documents were released. But people weren't buying it. Who exactly were they protecting, and why? Even legal experts started weighing in, questioning why this level of secrecy was even necessary. The moment people started asking what Blake was really trying to hide, the entire foundation of her legal strategy started to crumble.
What a standard court protective order is and what Blake Lively's team is asking for, which is an attorney's eyes only designation.
Here's where things get even worse for Blake. This is the same woman who had no problem leaking private text messages to the media when it suited her. The same woman who strategically released information to frame the narrative in her favor. But now, suddenly, privacy is her top priority. The double standard was too blatant to ignore. If she truly cared about protecting sensitive information, why was she leaking things to the press before the case even went to trial? If she believed in transparency, why was she fighting so hard to keep certain details under wraps?
Okay, so I have to admit, I don't keep up that much on Hollywood.
At this point, it wasn't just Candace Owens questioning her motives, it was everyone. For years, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds have been media darlings. They know how to play the game, but this time they misjudged the public. They thought they could carefully curate the story, push all the right emotional buttons, and get the internet on their side.
Well, you're trying to say, Ari, because she's your star client? Well, she's not. Her husband is. I'm not afraid of this, man. You are a bozo, and you look like a clown here.
Instead, they ended up exposing themselves. Blake's desperate attempt to control what the public sees didn't make her look strong. It made her look guilty. It made people realize that maybe there was more to this case than what she wanted them to believe. And when people start thinking that, the sympathy disappears. Blake thought filing a protective order would protect her. Instead, it only made people more curious. She thought she could control the headlines. Instead, she made herself the biggest story.
Same with Justin. He's been here for a while too, and no complaints about Justin up until now. But now we just should believe Blake.
She thought this lawsuit would make her look strong. Instead, it made her look like she had something to hide. And once that perception sets in, there's no coming back from it. Now, protective orders in high-profile cases aren't unusual. But what Blake's legal team pulled, that was some next-level Hollywood shadiness. They didn't just file for a basic protective order. No. They pushed for an attorney's eyes only, AEO clause, which meant not even Baldoni himself could see some of the evidence being used against him. Read that again. The defendant in a $400 million lawsuit wouldn't even be allowed to see the case against him. How does that make sense? Oh, but Blake had an excuse. She claimed it was to protect third parties like Taylor Swift. That's right, she dragged Swift's name into this mess, hoping that would justify keeping things buried. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. This is where Candace Owens comes in swinging, because if there's one thing she does better than anyone, it's calling out hypocrisy when she sees it.
It's not true. Then these two are bad cats. The one you said were so great and never did a nice thing. What if they're the bad cats?
And Blake Lively just handed her the perfect opportunity. Blake has spent this entire lawsuit painting herself as the helpless victim, someone who's simply fighting for privacy and justice. But here's the problem. This is the same Blake Lively who had no issue leaking private messages to the media when it worked in her favor. So let's get this straight. Blake is perfectly fine exposing other people's conversations when it benefits her narrative, when it makes her look sympathetic, when it helps frame the person she's suing as the villain. But now, suddenly, when it's her own messages that might be exposed, when the court might actually release documents that she doesn't control, now she's suddenly concerned about privacy? That's not about justice. That's about manipulation. Candace Owens wasn't having any of it.
So he fired him. I'm a ride or die. That's why he did it. Because he basically said, okay, fine. Yeah, Ryan and Blake, I'm going to go with you.
She went in hard, calling out the blatant double standards in Blake's actions. Because if this lawsuit were really about the pursuit of truth, If Blake truly wanted transparency and fairness, she wouldn't be begging the court to bury key evidence. She wouldn't be trying to control what people can and can't see. What she wants isn't privacy. What she wants is selective exposure. Blake wants to control the narrative. She wants to cherry-pick which details are revealed to the public while keeping anything damaging to herself locked away. She's not looking for fairness. She's looking for a one-sided fight, where she gets to throw punches without ever having to take one. Owens made it clear. This isn't about protecting innocent people. This isn't about avoiding unnecessary harm. This is about power.
Right?
Blake-
Like when she was trying to imply, like, wink, wink, I'm not going to name Lily Bloom. She was like pulling the Kanye, I'm not going to say who it was. And then
Blake knows that if everything comes out, the full context, the unedited conversations, the behind-the-scenes moves that have been happening, it could destroy her version of events. It could expose the truth. And if there's one thing Hollywood elites fear more than anything, it's losing control of the truth. So rather than take accountability, rather than let all the facts be made public, Blake is doing what every powerful person in Hollywood does when the tables turn against them. She's trying to shut people up. She's not just silencing Justin Baldoni, she's silencing the public. She's silencing the media outlets that don't push her side of the story. And most of all, she's trying to silence Candace Owens, because Candace isn't just talking about this case, she's exposing the entire system behind it.
They're just as much responsible for that hit as Blake and Ryan were.
And that's the one thing Blake Lively didn't prepare for. And speaking of hypocrisy, let's talk about Ryan Reynolds, because if anyone in this mess deserves an award for the most two-faced performance of the year, it's him. At first, Ryan was playing the perfect supportive husband, standing by Blake's side, reinforcing her claims that this lawsuit was a deeply personal, traumatic ordeal. He wasn't just backing her up, he was helping push the entire narrative that she was a victim, that this was a serious legal battle requiring strict confidentiality and special legal protections. But then, just days later, Ryan proved what this lawsuit was really about, because he turned it into a joke. While Blake was in court demanding privacy and protection from public scrutiny, Ryan was on Saturday Night Live laughing about the entire situation, treating it like some kind of comedy skit. This was supposed to be a life-altering, devastating lawsuit, but apparently it was also funny enough to make light of on national television.
she just says it. She's like, I don't want to name anybody else in the suit. But if you actually go back and review her initial filing, she lets us know that it is Isabella Ferrer.
So which is it, Ryan? Is this lawsuit a serious legal matter so traumatic that your wife needs special protections and secrecy? Or is it just another Hollywood punchline that you can joke about when it benefits your public image? Because you can't have it both ways. People saw through the act immediately, and suddenly Ryan wasn't looking like the clever, witty Deadpool star. He was looking like a fraud. The internet tore into him, calling him out for the blatant double standard. Because if your wife is truly suffering, if this case is truly that serious, why are you out there mocking it like it's some kind of joke? It wasn't just insensitive, it was embarrassing. This is the same Ryan Reynolds who has built an entire career on public relatability. He spent years carefully crafting an image of himself as the sarcastic, down-to-earth, effortlessly charming guy. But when this lawsuit exposed his hypocrisy, that mask started to slip. Because here's the truth. Ryan only takes things seriously when it benefits him.
Sorry? Huh? What about that? Is there a version of that could be possible in your big brain? Or is it just all money, 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 money? Who's going to make money? What's crazy is I bet you Wayfair could have made you a lot of money.
When Blake needs the public to rally behind her, suddenly he's a devoted husband standing by her side, taking the lawsuit seriously. But the moment it's more convenient for him to laugh it off, he switches gears and turns it into a joke. And what makes it even worse? The public wasn't laughing with him. Instead of coming off as a clever, self-aware celebrity, Ryan ended up looking like a man who doesn't even take his own wife's legal battle seriously. And that's when people started to see through him. Ryan Reynolds isn't the relatable, funny, good guy Hollywood star that people think he is. He's an actor, on screen and off. And in this lawsuit, he finally got caught playing both sides. The internet didn't waste any time roasting them. Within hours, fake Lively and crying Ryan started trending, and the memes were brutal. Fans were done playing along with Blake's victim act. They started calling her out for using this lawsuit as a way to boost her career. And Ryan, he got exposed as the ultimate Hollywood hypocrite, preaching about fairness while playing both sides. Then-
Miss Lively was informed when this scene was shot. After Mr. Baldoni called cut, he walked over to the actor's chair and said, I know I'm not supposed to say this, but that was hot. Did you two practice that?
Then came the next desperate move. Blake's team, completely out of options, resorted to the oldest trick in the Hollywood playbook, claiming they were victims of a coordinated media attack. In a last-ditch attempt to regain control, they tried to lump Candace Owens in with Perez Hilton, as if she was just another tabloid gossip peddler running some kind of smear campaign. According to Blake's legal team, Owens wasn't simply commenting on the case like the rest of the internet. No, they wanted people to believe she was actively working against them, part of some grand conspiracy to ruin Blake and Ryan's carefully curated reputations. It was pathetic. Owens' response? Absolute gold. She didn't just deny it, she ridiculed it. With perfect comedic timing, she sarcastically called Baldoni her long-lost cousin, just to highlight how absurd the claim was. Because that's how ridiculous Blake's legal team had become. They were literally trying to make it seem like Candace was some kind of secret ally in a Hollywood war she had nothing to do with.
After the success of that film, they clearly have money, they're going to make more projects, and clearly have good taste.
The accusation wasn't just weak, it was laughable. Blake and Ryan weren't just reaching at this point, they were grasping at thin air. They were scrambling for any excuse to paint themselves as victims, trying desperately to shift the focus away from the real issue, their own hypocrisy. And the best part? Every single move they made only proved Owens' point. Because, let's be real, if Blake was truly the victim here, she wouldn't need to resort to baseless accusations about some imaginary media attack. She wouldn't need to frame Candace as part of some elaborate scheme. She wouldn't need to drag gossip bloggers and commentators into this case just to create distractions. But that's exactly what she did. This wasn't about justice. It wasn't about clearing her name. It was about controlling the story. Owens was one of the few people who refused to blindly push the narrative Blake wanted, and that made her a problem. So what did Blake do? She tried to silence her. She tried to discredit her. And when that failed, she tried to shove her into the lawsuit itself to make it seem like she was just another voice in a coordinated smear campaign. But instead of making Candace Owens look bad, it made Blake and Ryan look desperate. Because at the end of the day, this lawsuit wasn't about fighting a media attack. There was no attack. The only thing Blake and Ryan were truly fighting against was the truth. Candace took it even further, calling out Hollywood's fake feminism, how people like Blake use women's empowerment as a shield, while manipulating the legal system to destroy reputations.
Then another point in the suit, she mentions a mutual friend, a quote-unquote another female cast member that's friends with Jamie Heath and Justin Baldoni.
She broke it down perfectly. This isn't about justice, it's about power. It's about making sure Hollywood elites always control the story. But this time, the cracks in their carefully crafted narrative are showing. Blake thought dragging Candace Owens into this lawsuit would shut her up. She thought that by name-dropping her in court documents, by lumping her in with gossip bloggers and so-called coordinated attacks, Owens would back off, maybe even rethink exposing the truth. Instead, it gave Candace even more material to roast them with. If there's one thing Candace Owens doesn't do, it's stay silent. She thrives on breaking apart carefully constructed narratives, and Blake and Ryan just handed her the perfect stage to do exactly that. Instead of making her retreat, they gave her a front row seat to their PR disaster. And now, she's not letting go. And the best part, she doesn't even have to dig for more hypocrisy. Blake and Ryan keep handing it to her on a silver platter. Every time they make another legal move to hide evidence, every time they contradict themselves in public, every time they panic and try to shift the narrative, they just prove Owens right. At this point, Candace has made one thing crystal clear. She's not going anywhere. Blake and Ryan walked into this thinking they could control the media, twist the facts, and come out looking like the perfect victims. But instead, they've done the exact opposite. They've exposed just how far Hollywood elites will go to silence people who refuse to play along. And now, they've completely lost control of the story. This is far from over. Candace Owens has dug in her heels, the internet is watching every move, and public support for Blake and Ryan is crumbling fast. Something tells me Blake and Ryan have no idea what's coming next.